Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most caustic thinkers in the history of philosophy, once said, "The degree of a people's civilization is measured by how it treats its weakest members." But what happens when elderly people, precisely those who have given their all throughout their lives, are treated coldly, dismissively, or indifferently? How does one preserve dignity when the respect that was once almost instinctive begins to vanish from conversations, gestures, and homes? At 55 years and older, many men and women face a reality that, though silent, is deeply painful. The respect they expected from adult life often does not come. In its place comes the discomfort of invisibility. People who once listened to them attentively now impatiently correct them. Family members who once sought their advice now sidestep them, like someone avoiding an obstacle, and what was once authority is now treated as an inconvenience. Often, these changes are accompanied by a tormenting question: what did I do wrong? But this question is based on a false premise. Disrespect is never caused by the one who endures it. Schopenhauer helps us understand that the problem does not always lie within ourselves. Many see others only as tools to achieve their own goals. This harsh view of human nature is not an invitation to bitterness but to clarity. Not everyone respects us because, unfortunately, not everyone sees value in another person for their own sake. They respect what they can use and discard what no longer serves their immediate interest. But here's the point. Even in a world that tends to devalue what it does not understand, it is possible and necessary to remain a respected person, not through force or fear, but through your presence, your poise, the steadfast calm of someone who already knows who they are. This video is not about strategies to control others. It is not about imposing yourself or wounded pride. It is about how to reclaim what is rightfully yours, the silent respect that arises from owning yourself. Schopenhauer said that true freedom lies in not allowing yourself to be provoked. It is precisely this presence that commands respect. Not shouting, but silence that does not bend. Not confrontation, but the firmness of someone unshaken by the ignorance of others. Over the next few minutes, you will learn 7 subtle but deeply transformative perspectives, 7 ways to stand up to the world, even when the world insists on devaluing you. Each of these approaches was inspired by Schopenhauer's practical philosophy. These are tools for self-control, dignity, and clarity. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to explain yourself to be understood. Above all, you need to remember your worth and act accordingly. If life has tried to erase you, it's time to revive your presence not with anger, but with awareness. If you enjoy reflections like these, subscribe to the Senior Health Library channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single video. Schopenhauer said, "Happiness belongs to those who are self-sufficient." But few understand how much this phrase applies to respect as well. We spend our lives believing that if we do good, if we treat others kindly, if we sincerely dedicate ourselves to a cause, we will naturally be respected. And for a while, but then the years of maturity arrive, and with them, reality often brings surprises. You offer politeness and receive impatience. You demonstrate experience and hear irony in response. You speak cautiously, and you are ignored. And then the question arises, have I lost my value? The answer is no, you have not lost your value. But perhaps you began looking for it in the wrong place in the opinions of others, in the recognition of those you may never have learned to truly see. And the more you insist on recognition, the more vulnerable you become. Schopenhauer was right when he said that those who seek approval from others hand their peace over to foreign hands. And this does not mean living in isolation. It means living freely, free from the need for applause, free from the anxiety of being misunderstood, free from the illusion that true respect depends on external approval. Have you ever noticed how some people enter a room and command respect without saying a word? It's not about the tone of their voice, their clothing, or their age. It's about their inner posture. It's how they carry themselves in the world, with presence and calm. These people aren't trying to prove anything, and that's precisely why they are seen. True respect is not forced. You don't shout for it. It emanates from a soul at peace with itself. And that begins within, when you stop justifying every choice, every thought, every silence. When you learn to say no without explaining. When you walk firmly through life, even knowing that some people won't understand you. Because it's true, not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will acknowledge what you've done, what you do, or what you stand for. And that's okay. Your value does not diminish because someone fails to see it. Just as a piece of jewelry remains valuable even if it's forgotten at the bottom of a drawer. You don't need to bow to be liked. You don't need to compete to prove you're still here. You don't need to repeat what you've already given. The simple fact of your presence with serenity is already a way to show, without words, that you are valuable. Insecure people shout, demanding attention. Self-aware people simply remain. Schopenhauer viewed self-sufficiency as a shield against the cruelty of the world. And that's what you're invited to cultivate now. Respect that doesn't depend on another person. It is born from your own way of existing. This is not arrogance. It's sobriety, maturity. It's the wisdom of someone who has realized that living to please others is the fastest way to gradually disappear. From now on, observe more, speak less, justify yourself only when it makes sense, and most importantly, stop seeking recognition where it was never offered. Because, in the end, the most powerful respect is the kind that doesn't demand. That's what happens when you stop chasing and start walking with your head held high, even in silence. There are gestures that say more than entire speeches. Standing up, for example, may seem like a simple, almost automatic act, but in reality, it carries a profound symbol. It's a silent declaration of presence, of self-respect. And in old age, this gesture becomes even more necessary. At many social, family, or professional events, it's common to see elderly people ignored, pushed to the sidelines, treated as secondary actors on a stage that no longer belongs to them. People enter a room and don't always greet you. They talk among themselves, take seats, impose their voices, and you might remain seated quietly, not out of weakness, but out of fatigue, or because you expect, once again, that your presence will go unnoticed. But this is where the silent stance that commands respect comes in. Stand up. Schopenhauer said that a person communicates more through their posture than their words. By standing up, literally, in front of someone, you say, "I am here, I am part of this, I have a voice." But standing up is not just a physical act, it's an inner gesture. It's stepping out of the passive role that many try to impose on you. It's stopping behaving like someone accustomed to being ignored. It's reclaiming, little by little, the symbolic space you've left empty over time. It's not about aggression, it's not about arguing, it's about presence. And presence begins with how you treat yourself and how you present yourself. When someone enters a room, stand up to greet them. Square your shoulders. Look them in the eye. Maintain a firm posture. These gestures, even without words, speak of confidence, dignity, and strength. Now think of something else. Standing up is also about reclaiming your emotional place in relationships. It means stopping accepting emotional crumbs. It means making it clear that you will no longer be treated as a shadow of what you once were. You still are. Not a memory, but a living presence. From Schopenhauer's philosophical perspective, respect is born from the perception of inner authority, and no one respects those who do not respect themselves. No one values those who hide or diminish themselves to accommodate others' discomfort. Unfortunately, the world usually doesn't offer space. You have to claim yours, gently but firmly, politely but unyieldingly. So, when you realize people are talking about you as if you're not in the room, stand up. When you realize your advice is being dismissed, amplify your presence. When their gaze wanders, their tone drops, or they pull away, hold your posture. Don't wait for respect to come from outside. It begins with how you stand up for yourself, and not just physically. Stand up for yourself. Refuse the role of the invisible. Refuse the idea that time has stripped you of importance. It wasn't time, it was others. But now, with this awareness, you can change your stance. Remember, respect cannot be earned by demanding it. It is evoked by how you occupy your body and space, and the posture of someone who stands calmly, even when everyone around expects silence, is impossible to ignore. Few things reveal more about a person than how they respond to provocations, and you may have already noticed that, with age, some people start to perceive your calm as weakness. They mistake your patience for passivity. They think your silence gives them the right to mock, joke, or speak loudly. But Schopenhauer warns, the one who is easily angered shows that anyone can control them. In other words, every time you react impulsively, you hand over control of the situation and your dignity to another person. That's why wisdom is necessary. And wisdom is shown not in shouting but in the pause between provocation and response. In that pause, you choose whether to be led or to preserve your autonomy. Have you ever been in a setting where someone told a joke at your expense? They laughed, they waited for your reaction, and for a moment, you had the chance to defend yourself, attack, or strike back. But there's a far more effective gesture. Pretend you didn't hear. Yes, pretend you didn't understand. Wait until the laughter stops. Then, naturally, look at the person who said it and say, "Sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't catch it." The power of this gesture lies in its cool-headedness. You don't get offended, you don't get upset, you return the provocation to its sender without changing your tone. Because repeating a joke that's no longer funny requires courage, and the embarrassment shifts sides. What was laughter becomes discomfort. And you, without justifying yourself, teach them that there are boundaries. This simple technique reveals what Schopenhauer called strength of spirit, the ability to remain undisturbed by another's ignorance, the ability to stay whole while the other person unravels in the face of their own mistakes. And it's not just about jokes, it's also about spiteful comments, judgmental looks, unnecessary corrections. Situations where they try to diminish you, situations that test your patience. The secret is the same. Wait. Breathe. Observe. And only then, if it's still necessary, respond. But never as someone who needs to defend themselves, never as someone who needs to prove something, but rather as someone who has nothing to prove. This is not arrogance. It's emotional elegance. It's a clear demonstration that your maturity has made you immune to childish power games. Remember, many provocations exist only because someone is waiting for your reaction, and when you don't react, the game loses its meaning. The provocateur loses their audience, and respect begins to take shape not through fear, but through the stability you convey. A well-placed silence has more impact than any calculated response. A pause before speaking unsettles more than direct confrontation, and a steady, calm, patient gaze commands more respect than 1,000 defensive arguments. Schopenhauer believed that the person who masters their reactions is freer than the one who masters the external world. And true authority is gained when you choose not to stoop to the level of those who try to diminish you. From this moment on, don't rush. Let the other person get lost in their exaggerations while you remain focused, aware, whole. Being interrupted mid-sentence may seem like a small thing, but it's one of the subtlest and most common forms of disrespect, and over time, it becomes more frequent for those who have lived many decades. You start to say something, and someone younger interrupts. You try to express an opinion, and someone else overrides it with their own. You calmly begin a sentence, and someone barges in, drowning you out with words. At first, you try to ignore it. Then you start staying silent. And then comes the quiet thought, maybe what I say is worthless. But that's not true. It's not a lack of substance in your words. It's a lack of recognition in your surroundings. And that recognition is not begged for. It is imposed with calm and self-possession. Schopenhauer said, "It is better to be ignored by fools than to stoop to their level to be heard." But this doesn't mean absolute silence. It means responding without being carried away, acting deliberately, taking a firm but non-aggressive stance. So the next time you're interrupted, don't swallow your sentence, don't smile awkwardly, don't lower your eyes. Instead, Pause, look directly at the person, wait until they finish, even if their words are irrelevant, and then calmly, without irony, say, "Do you mind if I finish what I was saying?" This question, asked with self-possession, changes the entire dynamic of the conversation. It doesn't accuse, but it clarifies and makes the other person realize what they just did. You can even adapt the phrase, "If you'll allow me, I'd like to finish," or "May I continue my thought?" You don't need to raise your voice, simply maintain the integrity of your presence. The act of reclaiming your speech, reclaiming your space, is a gesture of self-awareness. You elegantly declare, "I am here, and what I say deserves to be heard." Many people mistakenly think respect comes from power or formal authority. In reality, it stems from how you respond to attempts to put you in your place. If you accept being interrupted without resistance, the world understands it can keep silencing you. But when you respond calmly and firmly, something changes. People realize there is structure, a boundary, a personality present. Schopenhauer noted that constant interruption is a vice of those who need to assert themselves. But those who are already affirmed by the mere fact of their existence don't rush, they don't hurry, they don't need to impose themselves. They simply occupy their position. You, who have lived through so much, have the right and the duty to be heard, not by forcing it, but by merit, not by demanding, but by stance. And every time you reclaim your voice without betraying it, you teach yourself something important. Time hasn't taken your voice, it has only made it more measured, and for that very reason, more worthy of attention. If someone tries to cut you off, remember, it's your signal not to shout, but to teach, not to retaliate, but to affirm that your voice is and will remain worthy of being heard. Provocation is an ancient art, but resisting provocation is a sign of true maturity. And the older you get, the more you realize there are those who feed on your reaction. People who prod, hint, test your boundaries to see how much you can take. They don't want dialogue, they don't seek understanding, they just want to throw you off balance, because when you lose your composure, they gain power. Schopenhauer said, "The most effective way to annoy a fool is to remain calm in the face of their agitation." And that's exactly what you must do when someone tries to provoke you with harsh words, a contemptuous look, or unpleasant insinuations. Stay in place. Don't move forward, don't retreat, just stand your ground. True strength lies not in striking back with equal force. It lies in not letting another person dictate your emotional clarity. Many believe a reaction is a sign of courage, but in reality, courage lies in not reacting. It's maintaining your tone of voice, not altering your breathing rhythm, not letting another person's energy pollute yours. Imagine for a moment that in a conversation, someone says something offensive. You sense the intent to provoke. The expected reaction is to respond, argue, raise your voice, but instead, you choose an unusual path. You look them in the eye and say, with a slight smile, "Do you prefer tea or coffee in the morning?" The question disarms. Not because it's funny, but because it's unexpected. It breaks the pattern, interrupts the flow of tension, and most importantly, it wrests control from the provocateur's hands. This technique, despite its simplicity, is profoundly effective, and Schopenhauer would explain it this way. When you don't resist, the clash dissolves on its own. It's not about escaping the situation, it's about redirecting your attention. It's about showing that you are your own master, that another person's provocation isn't enough to destabilize someone who has learned to control their inner self. The calm preserved amidst chaos is disconcerting because the provocateur expects a response. They want conflict, they want a spectacle, and when they don't get it, they lose the reason for their presence. They lose power, they lose control. You can use this strategy in any context. At home, with family members who persistently test your patience. At work, with colleagues who mask their aggression with jokes. Even in public places where rudeness appears without name or reason. The key is not to let the other person dictate your reaction. You don't need to justify yourself. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't have to win an argument because you didn't enter one. Schopenhauer believed that calm is the ultimate stage of strength. And you already have that strength. It was built in silence, through decades of experience, through losses and new beginnings. Now it's time to use it, not to dominate others, but to remain whole in their presence. Provocation loses its meaning when there's no response, and respect often arises the very moment you choose silence and calmly move forward. Not every place deserves your presence. Not every table needs your silence. Not every connection justifies your staying. Over time, we learn that being present doesn't always mean being okay, and insisting on a space that diminishes us is often a slow form of self-denial. Schopenhauer aptly noted, "The greatest nobility of a person lies in quietly withdrawing when they realize they are no longer welcome." Perhaps you did everything right. You gave love, listened, cared, supported. But if the other person chose to respond with contempt, you must recognize the limit of your surrender. Because continuing to stay where there is no respect is not perseverance, it's self-denial. We often stay on the sidelines out of fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of being misunderstood, fear of seeming ungrateful. But forced persistence comes at a high price. The loss of dignity. You gradually fade, you tolerate crumbs, wait for gestures that don't come, accept looks that no longer see you. And all this becomes invisible to those around you but painfully clear within you. The act of leaving, when done consciously, is not flight, it's protection. It's not surrender, it's clarity. If someone treats you as if your presence is a burden, your absence will be the greatest lesson. Not out of spite, but because empty space speaks louder than 1,000 words. It shows that you don't merely accept being tolerated. It shows that you know your worth, even when others forget it. Perhaps you're in such a cycle. Perhaps you've already felt that you're always offering, always ready, always available, and yet you're treated coldly, indifferently, impatiently. Your tone changes, your gaze grows heavy, the time spent with you feels like an obligation. At that moment, you have two choices: stay and wither, or leave, even silently, and preserve yourself. Schopenhauer would say that the one who rises is the one who chooses to leave where they are not valued, because only those who know when to walk away remain whole. And it's not about making noise or forcibly breaking ties. It's simply about taking a step back, not insisting where your soul can no longer find peace. You can reduce your visits, respond less, stop seeking those who never seek you, and little by little, you can breathe in your own company. Life is made of cycles, and some cycles end only when you stop insisting. Often, after you leave, those who ignored you start to notice your absence. They may reflect, or they may not, but that should no longer define your choice. The most important thing is that you've become whole again. And wholeness exists only where there is respect. You've tried hard enough. You've surrendered enough. Now it's time to remember that your company is too valuable to impose where it's not wanted. Be kind, but be firm, and if necessary, be absent. An absence that doesn't hurt, but teaches. In life, there comes a moment when pain comes not from harsh words, but from silence laden with contempt. It's not what they say, but what they don't say. It's not overt offense, but indifference masked as politeness. You realize when you're in an environment where your presence is not acknowledged but merely tolerated. Perhaps no one says it outright, but you feel it. You sense it in the hurried glance, the mechanical tone, the absence of real listening. You feel it in the invitation made out of duty. You feel it in the attempts to keep up appearances when, deep down, your presence is perceived as a burden. And the truth is, it hurts, because there is no greater pain than being treated as a burden by those you've always put first. Schopenhauer said, "Human beings recognize their worth only when they understand that to exist, they don't need to be accepted." He said being mastered it. In other words, respect doesn't depend on the space you're offered, but on the decision not to stay where you've become a quiet inconvenience. Sometimes, we spend years trying to maintain connections that no longer embrace us. We insist on visits that bring us no good. We wait for calls that don't come. We wait for a change in attitude, like someone waiting for a season that will never return. But waiting without recognition is a subtle form of self-denial, and staying in that state only reinforces the idea that you're okay with being ignored. You don't need someone to tell you, "I don't want you here." The coldness has already said it. The haste has already answered. The disinterest has already declared itself. And in the face of this, there is a clear choice. Continue offering yourself where your presence is only tolerated, or step back with dignity. This decision doesn't require confrontation, it requires clarity. You can calmly and firmly stop insisting. You can reduce your appearances. You can redirect your time to people and spaces where you're still received with affection, not exhaustion. And if someone asks about your absence, you can calmly say, "I prefer to be where I'm welcomed, not where I'm tolerated." Not as an accusation, but as an affirmation of value. Some say love can endure everything. But Schopenhauer reminded us that love without respect is just slavery. And serving where there is no reciprocity is to become a shadow. You were not born to be a burden. You are a presence, a living memory. You are a story. You are a reference to everything that came before you. If someone can't see that, the problem is not with you, but with the other person. Your dignity must matter more than the desire to please. Your silence must be a choice, not submission. And your absence, if necessary, must come with peace, not guilt. Never force yourself to occupy a place where your existence has become uncomfortable. You are not a favor. You are not a family protocol. You are a whole being. And those who don't know how to recognize that will miss you when they realize the presence they tolerated was, in fact, a presence that sustained them. You've come this far, and if you've made it this far, it's because within you there is a deep desire to be treated with respect, but even more, to feel whole again. Not in the shadow of what you once were, not in the grip of others' opinions, but fully existing, worthy, and real. Perhaps life has left its marks on you. Perhaps you've been silent more than you wanted. Perhaps, in the name of peace, you've diminished yourself for years, accepted what came, tolerated what caused pain, stayed silent when you should have spoken. But today, something may have changed. Perhaps, by listening to each of these 7 perspectives, you've felt that it's still possible to change your stance, that there's still a way to rebuild your posture, even without changing anyone around you. Arthur Schopenhauer clearly reminds us of this. The true greatness of a person lies in their ability to remain calm when the world loses its reason. This calm doesn't come from weakness, it's forged in self-knowledge. The ability to step back without hiding, to speak without being carried away, to leave without causing pain. You've learned that respect is not demanded, it is evoked. It comes from the steadfast presence of those who don't erase themselves to fit in, from those who don't bow their heads out of fear of loneliness, from those who know that even when alone, they remain whole. Throughout this journey, we've seen that seeking approval means forgetting yourself, and peace begins within. Provocation wins only if there's a reaction. Interruption is an invitation to reposition yourself. Calm, when preserved, unsettles disrespect. Withdrawal, if conscious, teaches more than 1,000 speeches, and your presence should never be seen as an obligation but as a privilege. Each of these perspectives is an exercise in freedom. They are not meant to change others. They are meant to free you. From now on, you can walk more slowly, talk less, observe more, and choose wisely the spaces you want to occupy. Because living is, above all, deciding where to direct your energy. And respect begins when you decide not to give it to those who don't know what to do with it. Old age doesn't have to be a time of imposed silence. It can be a time of a quiet but powerful voice, a voice that doesn't shout but imposes itself through clarity, a presence that doesn't argue but transforms the environment with the depth of what it carries. If this video touched something within you, please write in the comments, "My calm, my response." It's a way to mark this moment, to acknowledge with words that a decision has been made to no longer dim yourself, to no longer yield to veiled disrespect, to walk with dignity, even if the world keeps running in the opposite direction. And if you know someone who also needs this message, share it with them. Because respect is a seed, and when someone plants it in themselves, it begins to bloom in others. You don't need to change the world. You just need to remember who you are, and when that happens, the world notices. If this reflection resonated with you, like the video, subscribe to the Senior Health Library channel, and turn on notifications to receive more stories and reflections like this. This way, you won't miss any new content. Take care of yourself, and see you next time.